Enjoying the $5,000 a month, Mom? David's words cut through the warm hum of the Christmas party like a sudden chill. I froze, my hand still resting on the edge of the freshly polished oak dining table, the tree lights reflecting softly off the ornaments in the corner. I had expected smiles, laughter, perhaps a few awkward jokes, but not this. The room smelled of roasted turkey and pine, a fragrance meant to evoke comfort and familiarity, yet the words lingered heavy in the air, twisting everything. I smiled faintly, a quiet acknowledgement that I had heard him, but said nothing, letting the words settle. Victoria, standing nearby in her tailored emerald dress, flicked her eyes toward me, her lips pressing into a line that could almost have been a smirk. The children ran past, laughing, their excitement oblivious to the silent tension building in the adult conversations. I turned my gaze back to the twinkling lights of the tree, each bulb casting a small circle of warmth, and allowed my mind to drift back through the years. The countless hours spent shopping for gifts, preparing dinners, balancing budgets to make every holiday feel complete for the family, the sleepless nights ensuring that every detail was perfect. I remembered late nights wrapping presents, the care I took in selecting the right toys, the way David's eyes had once lit up with genuine gratitude, and the hollow echo of those same eyes now, as if the warmth had been replaced by calculation. The voice of my late husband seemed to whisper from memory, reminding me of patience, of quiet dignity, of the unspoken strength that comes from endurance. I placed a hand over my chest, feeling the subtle tremor that comes with a mix of disbelief and hurt, but did not move, did not speak. Instead, I allowed the atmosphere to speak back, the soft clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversations, the distant laughter of neighbors filtering through the frosted windows. Each sound was a reminder of the contrast between the reality of now and the warmth I had once known. I watched David talk animatedly to a group of guests, his hand brushing lightly against Victoria's arm, their smiles carefully coordinated, as though every gesture had been rehearsed to display a life I had no part in. And yet, I remained still, aware of every glance, every subtle shift of body language, cataloging the scene with the precision of someone who has learned to observe before acting. A tray of cookies was carried past me, the scent of cinnamon filling the space, and I reached out to take one, feeling the mundane ritual anchor me in the present, even as the words lingered like a shadow. I reminded myself that I had seen these moments before, the quiet exclusions, the casual manipulations, and that patience had always been my ally. My fingers brushed the smooth surface of the crystal glass beside me, and I reflected on the countless times I had maintained composure, knowing that the power of silence could be far more persuasive than a raised voice. The party continued around me, the music flowing like gentle water, but my mind traced the patterns of relationships, the subtle maneuvers that suggested strategy behind smiles. I took a slow breath, allowing the tension to settle in my shoulders, letting the calm exterior mask the storm of recognition and resolve building within. In that stillness, I realized that this night, this casual remark, would not break me. It would mark the beginning of my observation, my quiet reckoning, the start of a careful and deliberate response that would unfold in the days to come, unseen but inevitable. The room continued to hum with the soft chatter of family and friends, yet I remained anchored in my quiet observation, noting the subtle exchanges that passed unnoticed by most. The soft clatter of plates and glasses punctuated the laughter of children, the warmth of the holiday lights reflecting off polished surfaces and casting gentle shadows across the room. I walked slowly along the periphery, my hand brushing against the edge of the sideboard, feeling the smooth lacquer beneath my fingertips, a small comfort amidst the uneasy energy that lingered. I watched Victoria adjust her dress, the careful movements betraying a consciousness of image, a performance meant for anyone observing but never for me. David laughed at a joke someone had told, the sound bright, but hollow to my ears, carrying no weight of sincerity. I took a deep breath, allowing the scent of pine and baked cinnamon to anchor me, the familiarity of holiday traditions contrasting sharply with the underlying tension that pulsed beneath the surface. My eyes followed Liam as he darted between groups, his youthful energy a reminder of innocence and the passage of time, and I felt the weight of years reflected back at me, Each moment of care and attention I had given to this family crystallized in that single observation. I paused near the fireplace, noting the flicker of flames against the hearth, the dance of light across the room mirrored in the careful lines of conversation and subtle glances exchanged by adults, every gesture cataloged, every nuance observed. The quiet awareness allowed me to see the patterns that had always been present but never fully acknowledged, the ways in which power and influence had shifted over time, often invisibly, often cloaked in politeness and tradition. I reached for a cup of tea, the warmth transferring through my hands, a grounding ritual that reminded me of the careful balance between patience and action. As I sipped, I noted the arrangement of ornaments on the tree, each one placed with care, a symbol of continuity and memory, and I allowed myself a small, private smile at the irony of it all, the contrast between outward appearances and the currents of control running through the evening. I observed conversations that passed like currents, some light, some tinged with unspoken agendas, and I cataloged each nuance, letting them accumulate, building a map of intentions and motivations, a guide for measured response. I felt no anger, no impulse to interrupt, only a steady accumulation of awareness, a quiet patience that strengthened with every observed exchange. In this deliberate stillness, I recognized the power inherent in presence, in silent attention, in the ability to witness and understand before any action is taken. The room moved around me, a living tapestry of sound, color, and movement, but within me, a calm clarity settled, a strategic readiness that promised careful, deliberate response in the days to come, each gesture, each choice measured and intentional, all unfolding beneath the familiar glow of holiday lights. I noticed Victoria glancing toward the dessert table, her hand hovering over the plates as if to measure reactions before acting, and I observed without interruption, cataloging every movement, every shift of expression. The chandelier above cast a soft glow, reflecting off the polished surfaces of the room and highlighting the delicate tension that had settled between us. Liam squealed as he tore past, his small sneakers tapping against the hardwood, a moment of innocence amidst the layered dynamics of adult interactions. I allowed the sounds to fill the space, the low murmur of conversation mingling with occasional laughter, while my mind traced the subtle patterns, the ways in which words left unsaid carried weight and meaning beyond their simplicity. David spoke to a distant cousin about the recent expansion of his business, gesturing with ease, the practiced charm of someone accustomed to influence, yet each motion was noted and filed in my mental ledger. The soft notes of a holiday melody floated from the speakers, wrapping around the room, contrasting with the careful scrutiny I maintained, a reminder that appearances could mask intentions. I adjusted my scarf lightly, feeling the warmth of the fabric against my neck, grounding myself, reminding myself of patience and measured observation. My eyes caught the glimmer of glass ornaments on the tree, each reflecting a miniature world within, and I considered the mirrored dynamics around us, the reflections of ambition, entitlement, and the subtle performances carried out without pause. Victoria laughed at a joke whispered by a guest, the sound light, but edged with calculation, and I noted the rhythm of her voice, the timing, the small inflection that betrayed awareness and strategy. I sipped my tea quietly, the heat radiating through the cup, centering me, providing a sensory anchor as I moved along the edge of the gathering, noticing how seating arrangements, slight pauses in speech, and shifts in posture contributed to an intricate map of social maneuvering. Each plate set, each ornament hung, each careful placement of napkins and candles seemed trivial to some, but I observed them as part of a larger composition, a scene built to convey perfection while concealing the subtle control that underpinned the event. I allowed the party to unfold, the rhythms of interaction playing out, my presence a quiet but attentive counterpoint, noting intentions, calculating future actions, and maintaining a calm composure that belied the intensity of my internal focus. The warmth from the fireplace flickered against the walls, casting shadows that danced like subtle hints of underlying truths, and I held myself in the stillness, the quiet observance of a seasoned participant in these familiar yet ever-shifting dynamics, ready to respond when the moment required, with patience, clarity, and precision. As the evening progressed, The warmth of the room contrasted sharply with the subtle currents of tension that flowed beneath polite conversations. Eleanor moved quietly near the fireplace, the amber glow illuminating her thoughtful expression as she traced the patterns of interaction around her. She observed the placement of family members, noting the subtle cues of power, the slight shifts in posture, the timing of smiles that seemed rehearsed. David engaged in animated discussion with distant relatives, yet his eyes occasionally flicked toward Victoria, a silent acknowledgement of shared strategy and mutual understanding that excluded her presence. The children's laughter created a rhythmic backdrop, a layer of normalcy that made the underlying manipulations all the more apparent. Eleanor allowed herself a slow breath, taking in the scent of pine and the sweet aroma of baked goods that had filled the room from the kitchen, a sensory reminder of her role as the steady anchor of the family. She reflected on the countless holidays past, the preparation, the thoughtfulness poured into each gathering, the quiet satisfaction of seeing joy radiate from her children, and the realization that the dynamics had shifted subtly over the years. Victoria's careful adjustments to her dress, the timing of her laughter, the calculated way she engaged with guests, all became a language Eleanor deciphered with calm precision. Eleanor's attention lingered on small gestures, a tilt of a head, a glance exchanged, the unspoken cues that carried meaning for those who understood the choreography of influence. She sipped her tea with deliberate slowness, the warmth grounding her, a tangible anchor as she continued her careful observations. Every decoration, every arrangement, every deliberate placement of ornaments on the tree seemed to Eleanor part of a larger narrative, a silent assertion of control disguised as festive harmony. The sound of a distant piano note, the gentle hum of conversation, the rustle of fabric as guests moved about, all formed a subtle symphony that Eleanor absorbed, parsing for intention and hidden meaning. She reflected on the quiet power of patience, of observing before acting, and the strength that comes from understanding the currents of influence without revealing her own awareness. Eleanor adjusted her scarf, feeling the familiar weight and texture, a reminder of years of tradition and resilience. And in that small act, she reinforced her presence, her readiness, her measured poise. She watched as Victoria offered refreshments, her movements meticulous, as if each pour and placement carried silent judgment, and Eleanor catalogued it all without a flicker of reaction, her calm exterior concealing the steady accumulation of insight. The fireplace flickered, shadows dancing across the walls, mirroring the layered complexities of the gathering, and Eleanor felt the quiet satisfaction of recognition, the subtle confirmation that she remained attuned, capable, and prepared to navigate the intricate social landscape of her own family. Every observation a step toward understanding and deliberate action when the moment called for it. The evening had settled into a quiet rhythm, the ambient light from the Christmas tree casting gentle shadows along the walls, reflecting off the polished surfaces of the furniture and the delicate glassware carefully arranged on the sideboard. Eleanor moved with calm intention, noting the subtle interactions, the way guests engaged with one another, the slight hesitations in movement, and the carefully timed smiles. Victoria was engaged in conversation with a distant cousin, her tone light, the inflections in her voice revealing both charm and calculation, each word chosen with awareness of how it would be perceived. David occasionally glanced her way, his laughter measured, his posture relaxed yet observant, a silent acknowledgement of the partnership in their shared performance. The children played nearby, their giggles a light counterpoint to the carefully choreographed social dynamics surrounding them. Eleanor allowed herself to observe without interruption, her mind cataloging patterns, connections, and nuances, noting what was said and, equally important, what was left unspoken. The warm scent of cinnamon and roasted pine filled the room, mingling with the aroma of freshly baked cookies, providing sensory continuity that grounded her in the familiar comforts of tradition. She traced the subtle shifts of conversation, the slight adjustments in seating, the fleeting expressions of amusement or discomfort, and she let the quiet patience of her presence become a silent force, unacknowledged yet profoundly influential. Eleanor sipped from her cup, the warmth radiating through her hands and providing a small, tangible reassurance as she continued to track the flows of interaction around the room. Each flicker of movement, each glance exchanged, each carefully placed hand became part of a larger map, a landscape of intention and influence that Eleanor was quietly assembling in her mind. She noticed the careful placement of ornaments on the tree, the precision of the table settings, the meticulous alignment of chairs and centerpieces, each detail reflecting the controlled environment that Victoria and David sought to maintain. In the midst of the festive ambience, Eleanor recognized the undercurrents of subtle competition and assertion of authority, the interplay of appearances and unspoken agendas, and she allowed herself a private acknowledgement of the awareness and clarity she held within. The glow of the fireplace flickered against the walls, casting moving shadows that echoed the complexity of the interactions, and Eleanor maintained her steady, measured presence, quietly observing, understanding, and preparing for the moments when careful, deliberate action would be both necessary and effective. Her patience, her composure, and her detailed attention to the dynamics unfolding around her positioned her not as a passive participant, but as a perceptive and strategic observer, fully aware of the patterns of behavior, ready to act with subtle precision when the circumstances required it. The soft murmur of conversation continued, yet Eleanor felt the subtle shift in energy as the evening reached its midpoint. She noticed the small, almost imperceptible exchanges between David and Victoria, a tilt of the head here, a raised eyebrow there, gestures that spoke volumes to those attuned to the nuances of social maneuvering. She moved deliberately along the edge of the gathering, a cup of tea warming her hands, and allowed the familiar sense of pine and baked goods to center her awareness. Each laugh, each pause in speech, each carefully orchestrated movement was cataloged in her mind, forming a precise map of influence and intention. She recalled the many holidays she had orchestrated with meticulous attention to detail, the long hours spent preparing meals, decorating, and ensuring that every gift reflected thoughtfulness and care, and she contrasted those efforts with the calculated ease she now observed, the effortless performance of David and Victoria, their energy directed toward projection rather than authenticity. Eleanor noted the positions of chairs, the subtle cues in how people stood or gestured, how Victoria maneuvered conversations to highlight certain topics while avoiding others, and she registered it all with quiet precision. The children's laughter and movement continued, a constant reminder of innocence and joy that contrasted with the deliberate games of the adults. Eleanor's eyes tracked the reflections in the ornaments, the twinkle of lights on the tree, each one a mirror of the dynamics playing out, revealing glimpses of hidden motivations and unspoken strategies. She sipped her tea again, allowing the warmth to ground her, and felt the calm certainty of observation, the clarity that comes from patient attention, knowing that every detail noted could inform her measured response. The music played softly, underscoring the atmosphere, providing a rhythm against which she measured interactions, recognizing patterns, and predicting potential outcomes. Eleanor adjusted her scarf lightly, feeling the familiar weight and texture, a small ritual that reinforced her presence and poise. She moved closer to the dessert table under the pretense of arranging plates, using the moment to subtly observe the arrangement of treats, the placement of utensils, the way guests navigated the space, all revealing intentions and priorities. Each moment, each interaction, became a thread in the larger tapestry she was quietly weaving, the story of the evening unfolding under her attentive gaze. She held herself with composed awareness, a silent strategist in a room filled with movement and sound, every observation sharpening her understanding and readiness, knowing that patience, clarity, and careful timing would ensure that her presence and influence remained undeniable as the evening continued. The evening shadows grew longer, and Eleanor moved through the room with a quiet attentiveness, every step measured and deliberate. She observed the subtle interactions among guests, noticing how conversations bent around certain topics, how glances were exchanged in careful coordination, and how gestures carried meaning beyond the spoken word. Victoria offered drinks with meticulous care, positioning herself at the center of attention, yet Eleanor noted the slight hesitations in her movements, the way her eyes occasionally flicked toward David as though seeking reassurance or approval. The children's laughter continued, a bright and unself-conscious backdrop to the intricate social dance of the adults. Eleanor's hand rested lightly on the back of a chair as she paused to watch the placement of ornaments, the alignment of plates, the intentional spacing that seemed to convey authority and control. She traced the connections between each subtle signal, each pause in speech, and the timing of reactions, building an internal map of influence that would guide her understanding and responses. The soft glow of the fireplace illuminated the room, highlighting expressions and revealing small tells that might otherwise have been missed in the warm, festive lighting. Eleanor sipped her tea slowly, the warmth anchoring her in the present moment, while her mind cataloged the intricate patterns of engagement, the unspoken power dynamics, and the strategies at play in the polished interactions of her family. She observed David as he laughed at a story told by a distant relative, noting the careful cadence of his voice and the fleeting expressions that betrayed subtle calculations beneath the surface charm. Each movement, each shift in posture, each carefully crafted smile was a piece of the puzzle, and Eleanor absorbed them with patient focus, understanding the significance without reaction. She noted the rhythm of the evening, the ebb and flow of conversation, the placement of individuals in relation to one another, and she allowed herself a quiet sense of readiness, knowing that understanding preceded action and that the accumulation of observation strengthened her position. The holiday music played softly, its familiar melodies weaving through the room, yet Eleanor's attention remained acute, cataloging the layers of interaction, the hints of intent, the subtle assertions of control. She adjusted the sleeve of her sweater, feeling the familiar fabric against her skin, and allowed the small physical comfort to reinforce her composed presence. In the soft flicker of the lights, in the reflections off the ornaments, in the measured laughter and careful exchanges, Eleanor found clarity, a quiet understanding of the evening's dynamics, and the reassurance that her patience and observation positioned her to act with precision, calm, and effectiveness when the time was right. As the evening drew to a close, Eleanor remained a quiet presence in the softly lit room, her attention carefully scanning the interactions that had unfolded throughout the gathering. The aroma of freshly baked cookies and roasted pine lingered, blending with the fading notes of holiday music, creating a warm yet contemplative atmosphere. She observed the subtle ways Victoria engaged with guests, the precise timing of each laugh, the slight tilts of her head, and the way her eyes sought validation from David without acknowledging Eleanor's awareness. David spoke easily, his gestures animated, yet Eleanor caught the brief moments of tension, the small flickers of calculation that passed unnoticed by others, cataloging them in her mind. The children had begun to wind down, their energy tapering off as plates of dessert were cleared, but Eleanor's focus remained acute, noting the final exchanges and lingering looks that revealed the underlying currents of influence and control. She traced the subtle connections between each gesture, each pause in speech, each careful placement of hands and objects, and she understood the dynamics at play with clarity born of patience and long experience. Eleanor sipped her tea one last time, the warmth offering a small comfort as she mentally mapped the evening's events, every observation adding to her understanding of the strategies, alliances, and subtle power plays that had shaped the room. The glow from the fireplace cast flickering shadows across the walls, highlighting expressions, movements, and interactions, allowing her to see the patterns that others overlooked, the silent communications that conveyed more than words ever could. She reflected on the many holidays she had hosted, the care she had taken in preparing meals, decorating, and creating a sense of joy and connection, and she recognized the contrast between her dedication and the orchestrated performances she had observed tonight. Each movement, each laugh, each exchange became part of a larger tapestry, a record of intentions and subtleties that Eleanor held in her mind, ready to guide her deliberate actions when necessary. She adjusted the scarf around her shoulders, feeling the familiar texture, a grounding ritual that reinforced her composure and patience. In the quiet of the room, as guests began to depart, Eleanor remained attentive, absorbing the final moments, noting the shifts in demeanor, the small gestures of courtesy that masked underlying motives, and she allowed herself a quiet satisfaction in the clarity and understanding she had gained. The festive decorations, The polished surfaces, the twinkling lights, all served as a backdrop to her contemplation, and she felt the steady confidence that comes from observation, patience, and the knowledge that her awareness positioned her to navigate the complexities of her family with measured precision and calm authority in the days to come. As the last guests began to leave, Eleanor remained near the doorway, her gaze sweeping the room one final time, taking in the remnants of the evening, the scattered napkins, the faint scent of pine mingling with the lingering warmth of cookies and roasted meats. The twinkle of Christmas lights reflected in the polished surfaces, casting gentle shadows that danced across the walls, a quiet reminder of the celebrations that had passed. She observed Victoria tidying up, each motion precise and deliberate. Yet Eleanor noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the slight flicker of uncertainty that betrayed the careful control she had exerted throughout the evening. David gathered his coat and gloves, checking pockets and giving quick instructions, his voice calm, but edged with the underlying pressure of managing appearances. Eleanor allowed herself a small, private smile as she took in these final interactions, noting every subtle inflection, every glance, every careful adjustment, understanding the dynamics that had played out with clarity and patience. The children, now yawning and clutching small gifts, were guided to the car by relatives, their energy spent, leaving the adults to finish the final moments of preparation for departure. Eleanor walked slowly toward the center of the room, letting her presence be felt without a word, each movement deliberate and measured, her calm composure a quiet testament to the attention and insight she had maintained all evening. She noticed the faint fingerprints on the glasses and the carefully arranged decorations on the mantel, small details that reflected both care and control, and she cataloged each observation with the precision of someone who had learned to read the unspoken language of family dynamics. The soft hum of the heating system, the creak of the hardwood floor beneath careful steps, and the fading music provided a gentle rhythm as Eleanor considered the patterns, the connections, the subtle influences that had been exercised and observed. She sipped her tea for the last time, feeling the warmth against her hands and allowing it to ground her as she reflected on the evening, the balance between performance and authenticity, the contrast between orchestrated appearances and the truth revealed in small gestures and fleeting expressions. Eleanor adjusted her scarf and took a deep breath, appreciating the stillness that followed the activity, the quiet opportunity to process the accumulated observations and insights. In this moment, she felt the calm authority that comes from patience, perception, and understanding, knowing that each detail, each interaction, and each subtle nuance had been noted, stored, and would inform the deliberate steps she would take in the days to come, ensuring that her presence, her insight, and her influence remained quietly, powerfully undeniable.